the first time that you met Indira Gandhi, do you remember it?
Absolutely, and very well. She was in London on the way back from New York. I think she had gone for the opening of the Nehru exhibition in New York. It was 1965, and Rajiv ji had already written to her that he had met this girl from Italy, whom he liked very much, and she asked him to bring me along to meet me. She wanted to meet me. So a date was decided, and from Cambridge, Rajiv ji drove me down, and just a little while before we enter the city, I got cold feet, and I said, no, I cannot meet your mother, I will not. And I didn't.
She was already Prime Minister at the time?
No.
She hadn't
This
become
was
Prime Minister.
1965.
So it was just before she became Prime Minister?
Yes. So then he had to excuse himself and say to his mother that he couldn't take me, that he had to change the time. And then the next day, I finally said, yes, I will. Okay, I will. I will meet your mother.
Why were you frightened of meeting Mrs. Indira Gandhi?
I suppose, you know, mother-in-laws are rather frightening figures, especially even more so mother-in-laws to be, possibly to be at that stage. And then when I saw her and when I met her, she was staying at the High Commissioner's place. I was, of course, terribly nervous, but pleasantly surprised because she was perfectly natural. I was a little, as I said, nervous. I couldn't speak English very well, very much at that time. And so she conversed with me in French. And when she obviously saw that I was terribly nervous, she told me, don't be afraid. I was young too and in love, and I understand you. That's absolutely...
That bowled you over?
Completely.
So the first conversation between Indira Gandhi and Sonia Gandhi was
Yes.
in French?
Yes.
And she bowled you over. That's the quality that then appealed to you, the ability that she had to reach out to you, even though
Yes.
you came, in a sense, from a different culture, and she made you feel at home almost instantly.
Absolutely. In fact, I came from a completely different culture, completely different background, and when it was decided, it was a bit of a longish process because then after I met her, a few months later, Rajiv ji returned to India, and before returning to India, I came to meet my father and asked him if he would agree to his daughter marrying him. Then we were away from each other for about a year, and my father sort of relented. He saw Rajiv and he said, I know this man is a good man. But he was more worried about his daughter because he felt that going so far away to a place completely different with different customs, he felt that perhaps I would not be able to get used to these new ways. So he agreed to give me a return ticket to India and back. I was supposed to stay for 2 weeks and see for myself. But then my mother-in-law felt, in fact, she spoke to the two of us. She said, well, if you have decided, if you are sure that you love each other, then it's better if you go ahead and get married.
By then she was Prime Minister?
That was, yes, by then she was.
So
she was Prime Minister.
So
that was actually...
Did she, when you came to India for the first time and lived with Mrs. Gandhi, what was she like at home?
First I lived with Mrs. Bachchan till my engagement and marriage, and then of course I moved to Safdarjung Road, where I lived with my mother-in-law.
What was Indira Gandhi like at home? Because the outside world saw Indira Gandhi as this tough, Some even said dictatorial
She
woman.
was
What was she like at home?
completely the opposite.
Completely the opposite at home.
Completely the opposite. Yes, she was.
Give me an example of what was she like at home. I mean, was she someone who...
Well, she was
I thought she was the lady of the house.
She was, but at the same time in a very gentle and sort of understanding way, at least with me. I suppose she understood my difficulties, you know, for coming into her home, not knowing the culture, the custom, the language, even English for that matter. Wasn't, I mean, I could speak and
French?
No, by that time I could make myself understood in English. But she was completely the opposite of what people sort of used to see her as. She was very warm, very kind. She would make sure that, you know, I would be given the kind of things that I liked to eat. She was, you know, she was well, very just like any other mother.
So it was not a traditional Saas-Bahu relationship, because, you know, over the years, the stereotype, which perhaps influenced you to be frightened of Indira Gandhi, is that the mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship can be a tough one.
Yes, well, it can be certainly so everywhere in the world, not only in India. And as a young girl then, I was frightened because that was the situation even in the country, my own country then.
She never made you feel like an outsider,
no.
Or that, you know, that you are someone who needs to... Did she sort of insist that you adjust to Indian culture? Or?
She was a very intelligent woman, as you would agree. And she allowed me space and time to get used to new ways, to what were for me completely new ways, new food, new way of dressing. So she allowed me the space. Of course, I mean, occasionally she would say, well, maybe, you know, perhaps instead of this, that. But always in a manner which would make me want to do so, rather than force me.
Because I was told she kept a very, very good table. She was very clear about what people should have for lunch, for dinner. Indira Gandhi, as you say, outside the world of politics, was very much a homemaker.
Yes, absolutely, she was.
And she sort of taught you and took you through the whole process, is it?
Yes, of course. And there were two, she had a personal secretary and a social secretary. I used to refer to them, to the three of them, as my three mother-in-laws, because they would also help me along in the ways of the home, Indian ways.
What influence did she have over your politics and life? I mean, even now, 32 years after she's passed away, how much has she influenced your politics and your life, your entire transition to India and then taking that big step into politics? Was Indira Gandhi the person who's influenced you at all times in the moves that you've made in your life?
Well, I wouldn't be in politics if I wasn't
her daughter-in-law.
Yes.
But when you had to take tough decisions in life, have you thought of her? I mean, you've had to take a lot of tough decisions in life. Your decision not to become Prime Minister in 2004.
The tough decision was, the first one was whether to join politics or not. I did not want to join politics. And as probably is known, I did not want my husband to join politics. He was not keen to join politics. He was very happy as a pilot. We had our own pace, our own life, and but it's precisely because of a certain duty that I felt towards my mother-in-law and my husband, because I saw them struggle, work day and night for to uphold certain values, certain principles. And when it came to my call, I felt that I was being cowardly, not to respond to them.
So you don't hold it against your mother-in-law sometimes that she virtually, as you say, forced your husband to join politics. You had to enter politics perhaps against your initial instincts because there was this image of Indira Gandhi, or the duty that you saw towards Mrs. Gandhi, that she saw politics almost as a duty and therefore virtually pushed her family members into politics.
I don't think she pushed any member of her family to join politics. But I think she brought up her sons in a manner in which they appreciated, they understood the kind of work, the kind of, in a way, sacrifice she had done to uphold certain values. Because I think she herself did not want to be in politics. Perhaps this is something that very few know.
She didn't want to be in politics?
She was not terribly keen to be in politics.
But once she was in politics, she was the ultimate power politician. So it seemed almost to the outside world that she was made for politics, that Indira Gandhi was made for politics. You're telling me today that you believe Indira Gandhi's instincts were not to join politics.
That's my belief. I may be wrong.
There is some evidence to that she had in the mid-60s even planned to go and live in England for a while.
Well, as I said, that is my belief. I think left to herself, she would have chosen a normal
So
life.
she also saw a sense of duty to Jawaharlal Nehru in a sense? Or to
I
the
will
country?
always say to her country, to the people of the country.
You think that was her thing, a sense of duty to the country?
Without doubt whatsoever.
The reason I'm asking you this is the one criticism that has always been made against Indira Gandhi, it's made against you, it's been made against the Gandhi family, is promoting dynasty. That it is almost as if you're saying that it wasn't as if the family members were forced into politics, but somehow they've all been in politics now for 4 generations. We are sitting in a house built by Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Indira, Rajiv, Sanjay, now Rahul. So it's 5 generations.
Yes, well, I see and understand. I mean, people do look at it that way. But I would say, just like in a family of doctors, in a family of professors, in a family of business people, one or the other within the family will choose the same path as the father, right?
You don't think that's dynasty politics?
No,
I would
say there is a difference, because in politics you are elected and you are defeated democratically. There is also that difference.
There is, but you don't. You believe that Mrs. Gandhi, because her father Jawaharlal Nehru was the ultimate Democrat, that Mrs. Gandhi somewhere was the one who pushed the idea of the family before?
No, I don't believe so.
It was always country first?
Absolutely. Country, the people, the country.
Is that what also eventually led you to take that big decision in 19?
Yes, because, by that time there was nothing else in my mind but to uphold my mother-in-law's ideals, values, not my mother-in-law's, but those of the Congress.
When I ask you mother-in-law's values, ideals, what according to you are the central ideals or values that Indira Gandhi represented according to you?
Secularism.
And secularism in the sort of classical way you believe, not as it's described today as minority appeasement, because there's
absolutely not.
It was to treat all religions equally.
Absolutely.
And every citizen.
All Indians.
Right, because
are the same.
And you believe that was
regardless of their background, of their religion.
And she practiced her life like that, because
yes,
I've seen pictures of Indira Gandhi with the tribals of the Northeast, with celebrating Eid and celebrating Hindu festivals. Now, many have criticized that over the years, saying that, that this has led to appeasement. You believe there was a genuine sense of treating everyone equally?
Completely, absolutely.
The reason I also ask you that is because with Mrs. Gandhi, secularism has been questioned, whether Mrs. Gandhi was genuinely committed later on to secularism or what they call vote bank politics. Was Mrs. Gandhi playing vote bank politics?
I would not like to discuss politics.
Okay.
We are discussing Mrs. Gandhi, the person.
I'm discussing Mrs. Gandhi's person. Mrs. Gandhi's black mark, ma'am, was the emergency. Yes. And till today, people, in a sense, look at Mrs. Gandhi from two images. One is the 1971 war as her biggest moment, and her darkest moment as the emergency of 1975. What do you believe, how do you believe she would see the emergency today? Would she see it as something she deeply regretted as the daughter of Jawaharlal Nehru?
I cannot say exactly how she would see the emergency today. But I can say that if she had not felt extremely uncomfortable with it at some stage, she would not have called for elections. Right?
That's true. In 77, she did take that big decision to revoke the emergency and hold an election that she lost. But did she ever personally, in conversation with you, tell you that she regretted it?
I remember instances where Rajiv ji was a pilot. He used to fly to various parts of the country. On a number of occasions, he would meet up with people or a passenger or a friend who would say, look here, I've heard that this is happening in whichever place. And he would tell his mother, and I could see that she would take it and she would listen to it and she would think about it.
But she never openly ever told you, Sonia,
I will write it in my own book.
That's what I'm wondering. Are you going to? Yeah, because you should. You should. Nobody knows Indira Gandhi.
If and when.
If and when. I thought it's about when more than if.
Well, let's see.
Let me come to the question about, when Indira wanted Rajiv ji to be her political heir after Sanjay Gandhi's death, you have publicly said that you were against it. You're saying it even today.
Yes, I was completely against it.
It's said famously in the book, you fought like a tigress to stop your husband from doing it. Did that change your equation with your mother-in-law those last years?
No, because again, she was a very intelligent woman, don't forget. She allowed the two of us to work it out amongst ourselves. She never said anything to me.
Was there a lot of privacy that she gave you all as a couple over the years?
Yes, we had.
I mean, your public life, the daughter-in-law and the son of a prime minister, it's not an easy space to be in because your public and your private life often get completely blurred. Did she allow you to keep your private life completely separate?
I think it was different in those days. There was less focus on us, the family.
You didn't have 24/7 television channels?
No, we didn't.
So that nobody was speaking into your life?
So we had, yes, quite a lot of space to ourselves.
Your mother-in-law wouldn't ask you every evening, where are you going out?
Never.
Never asked you all? Never. Who are your friends who are coming over for dinner?
Never. If we had friends, we would, she would know them. They were introduced. Some of them she knew from long before. They would come for meals to the house, at her table. So
there are those, ma'am, who say the Congress party today needs a leader like Indira Gandhi to take on someone like Narendra Modi. The reason they say is Mr. Narendra Modi is this tough prime minister, much like Indira. And the Congress doesn't have that kind of tough, competitive leader to take on.
I don't agree with that. Don't forget that when Mrs. Gandhi entered politics, she became president of the party or later prime minister, she was ridiculed. She was made fun of. She was insulted. There was nothing that she did that was right.
She was called Gungi Guriya.
From within her own party, I would say perhaps even more than outside. Right?
And you believe that she was able to overcome that?
She was able to overcome that. She did overcome that.
I'm just wondering whether that's something you learned from Mrs. Gandhi, because there is this fighting spirit that we've seen in Sonia Gandhi from time to time. Is that something you learned from your mother-in-law? Because you were attacked, viciously attacked.
Yes.
Today Rahul is also attacked.
Absolutely. Yes.
Does the family take, in a sense, confidence from what Indira Gandhi was, or do you believe the world has changed? You need to be more competitive now than even in the 1960s and 70s when the Congress was the dominant party. You didn't have a leader like Mr. Modi to take on then, that Mrs. Gandhi had.
You know, every sort of era in politics or in history has its own problem, its own leaders or its own opposition. No, I think the Congress party is taking on the present dispensation.
But did you take inspiration from Mrs. Gandhi, from what she went through?
Maybe subconsciously I did. I can't say that I sort of studied her, what she did or no. I never did. Subconsciously, I guess one imbibes, like in any other family. As I said, I don't know.
And you think your children also? Because now today when you say that they can take on, you think they have that spirit? You think it's not true that Rahul and Priyanka have had more sheltered lives, unlike your mother-in-law who went through the freedom movement?
Not at all.
So they can take on the likes of Mr. Modi?
Absolutely. So much more is expected of us because we have a certain surname, because we belong to a certain family, and we sort of gather some sort of inner strength to make it possible for us to face such things.
So you don't sort of, I know this is a political question, but you don't sort of see the Congress as a party which in Mrs. Gandhi's time was the dominant party of the country. Now you have to come up from 44 seats. You don't think that it's all... I
think that it is absolutely possible. Not only it is possible, we will come up from 44 seats to the seats needed to have strength, full strength in power.
You will come back to power, you believe?
Absolutely. In politics, you win, you lose. You come up in power, you go down. It's part of life, in every sphere of life.
The reason do you get troubled when people ask you, when political observers or people write, or BJP leaders say, Narendra Modi is like Indira Gandhi, he's that power politician? Does that trouble you?
It doesn't trouble me because I don't believe in it at all. I have my own very clear view. There is no comparison.
There is no comparison?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
As a power politician?
Absolutely not.
Let me ask you a question that many also ask. Priyanka Gandhi, your daughter, is supposed to resemble Indira Gandhi. Who in the Nehru-Gandhi family today is more like your mother-in-law? Who's been the most in all the years that you've seen them?
Every one of us has been influenced by Mrs. Gandhi, my mother-in-law, and in their case by their grandmother, in different ways, right? I've been influenced in my own way, in a particular way, Priyanka in another way, Rahul in another way.
So it's not about...
There is no model kind of thing, that, oh yes, I am, or she is, or he is. We all have been influenced in different ways.
Because my trick question then would be, or what people would ask is that, will Rahul be the person who will take forward this legacy?
Well, that you have to, I'm not the person to...
You won't decide that?
To decide or to reply,
Because you've been, Mrs. Gandhi, ma'am, had one of her big strengths was her durability. She started in the early, people forget, in the late 50s, under Mr. Nehru. 66 becomes Prime Minister, 84, 18 years. You've been also Congress President for almost that long. And people ask, will Mrs. Gandhi give way to the new order? Will Rahul take over? Are you ready to retire? Do you think about these things?
No politics.
No politics.
Mrs. Gandhi only today.
Fair enough. Mrs. Gandhi only today. I take your point. Ma'am, since we are talking about Mrs. Gandhi, you saw her the first time, you said, in London, in happy circumstances. You saw her the last time in not so happy circumstances. 31st October 1984. She literally died in your arms in Safdarjung Road. Your recollections, ma'am?
Yes, that was a terrible day. It was, I was in my room, and which was right next to hers. She was preparing to go for an interview, and I heard some noises. Diwali had just been, and sometimes, you know, Diwali sort of carries on a few days later, and I heard these noises, and I thought maybe they are Diwali's patakas, but there's something was different, and I sent one lady who worked for me out to see what is it. She came back howling, crying, and of course I knew that something, because we were expecting it. My mother-in-law knew. She had spoken to us about it. She had given instructions. She had spoken to Rahul in particular. And I ran out, and I saw her, well, body riddled with bullets, and we took her to the hospital, which was again a terrible because there was no ambulance, nothing, so she was placed in the ambassador in the back seat, and I was sitting with her in my arms, and there was a lot of traffic. Anyway, slowly we reached the hospital, and that.
Did it take you a long time to come to terms with what had happened to your mother-in-law?
Yes, it was a terrible blow for me. It was a terrible blow, of course, for Rajiv, for Rahul and Priyanka, for all of us.
How do you assess, ma'am, her contribution to the country? As you said, you believe above all else, was committed to the idea of India and country above all else. If today, as we sit here in Swaraj Bhavan, you were to assess Mrs. Gandhi's greatest contribution to this country,
her
100th year is now beginning. There's an exhibition in her name which is going to travel across the country.
I would put it in these words. Her greatest contribution is her loyalty and devotion to the people of India. Because from that flow, you know, everything else
what was this special?
flowed.
Yeah, what was this special connect that she seemed to have? She could, you know, Pranab Mukherjee, the president,
she
told me.
identified with them. There was something about her, her deep compassion, which people, you know, very few people talk about.
President Pranab Mukherjee told me something interesting. He said that if you have a political meeting in Lapland, in the Arctic Circle, Indira Gandhi and the Pope will be the only two people to attract an audience even there.
Well, I don't know about that.
But she had some kind of connect with the average person.
She definitely had. She definitely had.
Did she ever talk about it to you, about this special relationship that she had with the people of this country? What is it that drove her to work every day?
She was she had in her deep compassion and empathy for the underdog, for people who were in need of help and support.
Something that maybe is missing in today's politics.
Very much so, yes.
The reason I ask you this is because she also was the first, you know, an Indian woman in 1966 to become the Prime Minister of the country. America couldn't produce a president in 2016 who was a woman. The fact that she was a woman, did that in any way, you think, did you see that side of her? Was she proud of her sort of almost feminist? Was she ever a feminist, or was she, as someone once put it, the only man in her cabinet? Did she ever, the fact that she was a woman Prime Minister with all the men around her at that time, we were still a very male-dominated society, did that affect Mrs. Gandhi in any way, influence her decisions, make her tougher maybe?
I don't think so. In fact, I think she did say somewhere, I seem to remember, that she never felt that she was a woman amongst all these colleagues of her. She always felt as an equal to them.
You know, I asked you about her darker moment, which was the emergency, but possibly her greatest triumph was 71 and the war and the victory over Bangladesh. Did it change her in any way at that time? You know, do you remember that period and Mrs. Gandhi in that period? Was she very different at home, outside? Because it must have been a difficult period.
No, she wasn't different. Of course, she felt strongly for the people of East Bengal, because if you remember, there were terrible atrocities committed on the people of East Bengal. I remember as a young, of course, yes, I was young then, we used to hear horrific stories, and she felt sort of genuinely pained about it.
She would take those troubles.
She suffered with those people.
She would take the troubles home. She would, when she came home.
No, she would. Of course, she would come. She would tell us about what was happening there.
The reason I'm asking you is because after 71, she was made Ma Durga in the eyes of people. Is that how she saw herself, as Ma Durga?
No, absolutely not.
How would she have seen herself?
Absolutely not.
She saw herself purely as someone who had this special relationship with the Indian people.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Which is why, in conclusion, as this exhibition now comes, a traveling exhibition on her 100th birth anniversary goes across the country, a young generation has grown up, which hasn't even seen Mrs. Gandhi, all born after 1984. What would you like that young generation to see in Mrs. Gandhi through this exhibition? What is it that you...
To try and understand and see a woman who was completely and totally devoted to her people, who was willing to give up everything, including her own life, for the people of her country.
So it's the sense of sacrifice that she gave. And do you think that came from her father and the fact that she herself had been through that freedom struggle, that she grew up in this place?
She grew up during that period. In fact, she herself was jailed for not for long, but in fact she was during the freedom movement. She herself had organized a Banar Sena of young kids who used to go around quietly, pass on information to leaders or seniors because they were watched by the police, and to distribute quietly leaflets against the British government.
So her sense of patriotism is what drove her.
So it was very, very strong in her. It was, I would say, it was everything.
The reason I'm asking you this is because we are sitting here actually in the very space where she was born, where in a sense the influence of Motilal, Jawaharlal, should be still felt in a way.
Of them, of course, and all the other stalwarts of the freedom movement, because this was the center where, all of them used to meet and strategize. So, and she knew them all. She met them all. Of course, she was very young, and then later on, but she knew they were like a family. They were like family for her.
You have a favorite Indira Gandhi moment? She had a very good sense of humor, I'm told. She could be very cutting.
She had a very cute sense of humor. She was a wonderful letter writer. She was a wonderful...
She'd write you a lot of letters?
Yes, not only to me, but to her friends, to relatives, to colleagues.
Little notes that she would leave for you?
Little notes that she would leave for me, for other members of the family. Yes, yes. And I think another aspect of Mrs. Gandhi that perhaps is not so well known is that she was interested in everything and everybody. She had great interest in music, classical music, Indian and Western, heritage,
environment,
classical
she was
art,
the original environmentalist.
classical art, folk art, folk music, environment, of course, you know, flowers, trees, mountains. She had this great interest, I would say, in everything and everybody.
As you look today into the camera, sense of nostalgia when you think of her? I can see your eyes sometimes well up when you think of your mother.
Of course, we still miss her. Yes, we do.